First came the Oval Office, then the Hill, and today's stop on Trump's wall tour 2019, the southern border, where he once again made his case.
They say a wall is medieval. Well, so is a wheel. A wheel is older than a wall. And I looked, and every single car out there, even the really expensive ones that the Secret Service uses, and believe me, they are expensive. I said, do they all have wheels? Yes. Oh, I thought it was medieval. The wheel is older than the wall. You know that? And there are some things that work. You know what? A wheel works and a wall works.
And as for who's paying for that wall, today we got a slightly different story than in the past.
When during the campaign, I would say Mexico's going to pay for it. Obviously, I never said this and I never meant they're going to write out a check. I said they're going to pay for it. They are.
Okay, that wasn't the only reliable refrain Trump brought back again today. Before he left D.C., he was asked about whether he wants special counsel Robert Mueller's report to be made public when it's finally completed.
We'll have to see. There's been no collusion whatsoever. We'll have to see.
So basically, if the report comes to that same conclusion, yes. If not, not so much. And as for that no collusion claim, the top Democrat on the Intelligence Committee disagrees, following the revelation that former campaign chair Paul Manafort was sharing internal polling from the campaign with a Russian associate who had ties to Russian military intelligence.
This appears as the closest we've seen yet to real live actual collusion. Clearly Manafort was trying to collude with Russian agents. And the question is, what did the president know?
Asked that very same question today. Here's how the president responded.
No, I didn't know anything about it. Nothing about it.
And the president didn't know about those slush money payments to Stormy Daniels either, until he did. Joining me are Nancy Gertner, retired federal judge and senior lecturer at Harvard Law. Judge Gertner, it's good to see you.
Good to be
Attorney
here.
Don Stern, who worked alongside Bob Mueller, both during his stint with the Department of Justice and in private practice at Hale and Dorr, former U.S. attorney. It's good to see you, too. Thanks so much. Is Mark Warner onto something? It seems to me this is about as assuming the allegations are true, this is about as close to collusion with the campaign and the Russians as we've seen. Yes or no?
Absolutely. On the one hand, there's this pocket of information that we know about from the indictments about what the Russians were doing with social media and hacking the emails. On the other hand, there was a question of people lying about their Russian contacts. This is something that finally bridges what was the campaign doing and what was, what the Russians were doing. Why else are you giving internal polling data? Because one question was, how did the Russians know when and what social
target,
media and what to target? The question that the president is raising is, is Manafort the aberrant, wacky guy who, and it wasn't going any further than Manafort, or is it something that Trump knew about? And then you have to add to the soup all the people who lied about Russian contacts, the sanctions, policies about sanctions changing, and the June meeting with someone that the Trump Tower meeting with someone that we now know not to have been an itinerant lawyer in Russia, but someone who in fact was wired into Russian intelligence.
I want to get back to what the president knew or didn't know in a second. Another element here, one of the defenses the president has used to date, Don Stern, is to say that anything that Manafort's been convicted of, pled to, or been talked about was prior to the time he was my campaign chair. This was while he was the chair of the Trump campaign for the presidency. Big difference.
Right. That's true. And I do want to make one related point, is that collusion is not a crime. Collusion, to me, has an amorphous meaning. Really what we're talking about is there a conspiracy to violate the laws of the United States? And the president keeps on saying, no collusion, no collusion. I'm not even sure what that means. The question is, is there enough evidence, has Mueller put together or will he put together enough evidence to suggest that members of the campaign, maybe the president himself when he was a candidate, General Flynn, Manafort, others, did they participate in a conspiracy? And by the way, conspiracies don't necessarily mean that A talked to B and then talk to everyone else. A can talk to B, C can talk to B, B can talk to D, and if you can put together that there was a conspiracy, a meeting of the minds, that's enough to violate the federal law.
Is this a good start in that direction?
Oh, yes.
Absolutely.
This is the closest we've come.
Yeah.
This is the closest we've come. This is during the campaign, direct with Russia, dealing with votes. This is the closest we've come.
And by the way, we have no, I want to be clear, since all three of us have mentioned the president, we have no idea, based on this this failure of Manafort's lawyers to redact some of this stuff, if our people aren't clear, it's just a mistake. We have no idea if this went above Manafort, as you suggested a minute ago, or not. We have no idea.
No, we don't. But I mean, let me follow along with what Don was saying. Think of it like there's a continuum. At one end is the president knew, directed, was on top of. The second is the president sort of knew, but said, I don't want to, don't tell me the details. Then there's a whole range of mental states from all the way to being reckless and negligent. One end is criminal. The other end may still be impeachable, even if it's not criminal. And people, his complicity could have varying gradations.
Understood. And the reason I mentioned the Stormy Daniels thing, obviously it's not relevant to this, except as an example of the fact that there have been times in the past, many, when the president said, I didn't have anything to do with X, I didn't know why, True. When in fact he later had to admit that he did.
And look, I don't think we know the full story yet about Manafort. We know a little sliver based upon the failure to redact. And it certainly appears to be true that Manafort was heavily in debt. And it's certainly possible that he was doing this for his own personal economic reasons, having nothing to do with Trump or the campaign.
Chuck Todd from Meet the Press was on the radio with us today, and he asked what I thought was an interesting question that he didn't have an answer to. Why does Donald Trump go out of his way to trash Michael Cohen at any opportunity, but never says a bad word about Paul Manafort? What conclusion do you draw, if any,
Well,
from
he's
that?
hoping that Manafort won't roll on him. That's what he's hoping. He's hoping that Manafort will, sort of stay the course. Who knows? I think that Manafort is facing an enormous amount of time. I think Manafort, I understand, is ill. This is an example. The failure to redact is an example of chaos in the defense camp. I don't know what he would do.
Do we have any idea what the status of this thing is? There have been a lot of assumptions on cable television. Rudy Giuliani, his television lawyer, I love that expression, which is mine, but his television lawyer has said, we're done, it's over, and we assume that means not the investigation is over, we're done cooperating. Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General, who has been in charge of the oversight of Mueller, said, I'm retiring as soon as the new Attorney General is confirmed, William Barr. Should we draw any conclusions from either of those things vis-a-vis the status? We'll find out why she's laughing in a minute.
Right.
Vis-a-vis the status of the Mueller investigation?
No? I wouldn't. Just from those facts, the answer, I think, is no. I mean, we know, for example, that there was a recent appeal through the D.C. Circuit, which went up to the Supreme Court, having to do with a subpoena. You have to think that Mueller, assuming it's Mueller, we don't even know if it's Mueller, that there's information which is being sought. Let's assume it's Mueller. So does that mean that this thing could play out many, many months before? I know the media has sort of surmised, well, he's coming to the end, maybe it'll be 2 months, 3 months.
We've said that about 400 times.
I'm doubtful.
Why am I giggling?
Yeah.
I'm giggling because what he's doing is excusing why the president is not ever going to sit down with Mueller. The president is not going to ever sit down with Mueller, not because the investigation is over, but because no lawyer who is sane trusts this man to talk to Mueller without lying. So they've answered things in writing, and he wants to say, that's it, no more. And that's why he's saying the investigation is over.
Well, they may appreciate this. We played some video from a deposition in a civil case that Citizen Trump did, I don't know, several years ago. And in the beginning of the deposition, he is asked by the lawyer for the other side, did you sign any documents? He says, absolutely not, my son did. And they pass him a piece of paper on which his signature appears. And he said, oh, yeah, I signed that thing. So I guess that's what you're talking about.
Right.
How about disclosure of this thing when it's over? If you're right and it's still a ways to go, or if it's sooner, as the media, I guess, would like it to be, the new likely to be Attorney General has already said, quote, Mueller's obstruction theory is fatally misconceived. Despite what a lot of people think, this is a confidential report. The Attorney General does not need to release it. We read in the Washington Post today, 17 new lawyers in the White House counsel's office. Their job is to figure out how much executive privilege can be put in place so that none of this goes public. Are we ever going to see this thing?
Well, first of all, Mueller had to know from the minute he was appointed that he could be fired at any moment and that there would be an issue with respect to the report. So what he's done is filed indictments that are has way more narrative than you ever would anticipate. I mean, the Russian indictments in particular were basically telling a story, and it's like a storyboard. This indictment, this indictment. So
a lot of redactions in those, though, that actually worked.
There have been redactions, but still, he's put much more information out there. and then this sort of was a negative pregnant that Barr said, that the obstruction part is wrong.
Yes, he did.
Right.
Fatally
the rest may be fine. So that if in fact Mueller comes up with any real conspiracy to interfere with the election, they won't have an issue.
One last thing before we go here. I mentioned Michael Cohen agreeing to testify in front of the Oversight Committee. Forget executive privilege. I assume attorney-client privilege is going to be at issue, not to mention the fact that your colleagues, the Southern District of New York U.S. Attorney, and Mueller himself may not want Cohen to testify about things that are still pending, correct?
Well, my understanding is that the chairman of the committee has said that he will consult with Mueller to make sure that nothing that Congress does interferes with the investigation.
So this may be much ado about not much at this particular time.
I think they're going to steer clear. If Mueller specifically says, look, I don't want you to ask him about this because that's an active investigation, he won't be asked about that.
Don Stern, thanks so much. Good to see you.
Yeah.
Judge Gertner, good to see you too.
Nice to see you.
As always. Appreciate it.